Dear colleagues, Ukraine Crisis Media Center continues its work, and the topic of the briefing, presentation of the new international think tank, Continental European Union Club. And our speakers are Olivier Védrine, European expert, Illya Ponomarev, deputy of the State Duma of Russian Federation, Olga Kurnosova, Russian political scientist and director of Saint-Petersburg Department, United Civil Front. And also today we will have Fedir Klymenko, chief editor of Russian Monitor, and Volodymyr director of Information and Analysis Center of National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, and Oleksandr Khara, expert of the charity foundation Maidan of Foreign Affairs. I invite all the speakers to take the floor.
Yes, good morning to everybody, and thank you to be there. Yes, we will open a new think tank club, Continental European Union. Why? For three main points. First, to support the Russian opposition and to support the Russian opposition against Putin policy. That means also, second point, to support a free and independent Ukraine, to support the reforms in Ukraine. And the third point, why we want to build this club, a Continental European Union club, because we want to share and develop the European values from Lisbon to Vladivostok against the values of course, of Putin system. And the conclusion is that's very important, because if we win this ideological war, that means we will also help European Union to be united. Because as you know, now the Putin policy is also to destroy the European Union unity, and we have also here to win in Ukraine. That means we will win also for the European Union and for all the European continent. And that means that now we have only one problem. This problem is Putin system and the Putin policy. Thank you. I will now give the floor to my friend, at first, Illya Ponomarev.
Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья. Знаете, всегда очень трудно переводить.
It's difficult to translate the word think tank into Russian and Ukrainian. And usually they say it is an analytical center, but the key word in the English name is think, the word that means that we should reflect on something. And this word is lost in translation into Ukrainian and Russian, and this is critical. As Ukrainian experience show after Maidan, and 2 years passed, and those reforms that were carried out in Russia before, people are talented. We have a lot of energy. We have a lot of wishes. But we lack knowledge in the sphere of transformation and reforms. And we should have more organizations like this. We will have more chances for these reforms. And it's important that these organizations were also, they should establish coordination and communication between Russia and Ukraine, because there were many troubles in Russian communication sphere, and we had many variants how to modernize our state, but we know what works and what doesn't, and we, Russian opposition, will look carefully at Maidan experience. And we learn from your mistakes, because we see it now clearly that some things work and some don't. And for us, we want to view Russia after Putin and what will be done after that. It is critically important. And I think that Russia after Putin, it is born here in Kiev now. And now I give the floor to my friend colleague and revolutionary from the cradle of all Russian revolutions, St. Petersburg. Thank you, Illya, for this introduction. And what is born here is very important, because Kremlin propaganda usually say about one position that you can only fight against. You can't fight for something. You have no positive program. What can you do? Actually, look at Ukraine. In Ukraine, in 2 years, nothing happened. And these are the main memes that are translated by Kremlin propaganda. It is translated into Russia, Ukraine, and into the world. And this birth is important, and also people who participate also important. And you see that Olivier, he is a European, and he and Europeans, they try to think that Russia is also Europe. And for me, I live in Petersburg, I'm Russian, and I believe that Russia is Europe. And now there are some more Asian trends in Russia, but we believe that we return to Europe, and these are the first steps towards Europe. And I'm glad that these actions have been taken, but I know that we should change the system, not just Putin. And what system is going to be after Putin? We should think about it. Now I give the floor to Mr. Klymenko, and he is the chief editor of Russian Monitor site. And you know that Kremlin carry out information war, and we should provide proper information in order to win. Thank you, Olivier Védrine, for this opportunity to take part in this important project. And I believe that this is a unique project, because we have a lot of different structures who want to lead, to create a vector for future development of Russia. But the only person, the representative of the European Union, Olivier Védrine, he said that today we should work, and we should return Russia to the European community. And as I understood it, to rehabilitate Russia, to restore it as a European state. And I believe that this fund that is created now, it will pay close attention to different methodological recommendations for independent media in order to help to fight Russian propaganda and to stop and destroy these information blockades created by Putin in Russia. I would like to give the floor to Volodymyr Poliovyi. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. As it was stated by Mr. Olivier, Continental Club will work with Russia, Ukraine, and Europe, and the Minsk agreements were signed, and in Munich they signed new agreements on ceasefire. And in Syria, the war should have been stopped, but you know that in the north they destroy the opposition. They call them terrorists. And no Norman, no Munich format, no OAC, they are not active structures in this process. As to the Russian vector, Olivier and Russian colleagues, they speak about support of Russian opposition, and Khodorkovsky in London said about the fate of Crimea. He said that population of Crimea should decide their own fate. But you know that it's not about support of opposition on the whole, but to support all anti-imperialism forces that are there in Russia. And the mission of Ukrainian Continental European Club here in Ukraine is the creation of new Europe on the ruins of Russian Empire. Why we are speaking about Ukraine? Because Ukraine is a field of battle where old system, Russian Empire, and new Europe and new Ukraine, they clash here. So, and we want to unite people around these ideas. And I give the floor to Oleksandr Khara, the representative of Maidan of Foreign Affairs initiative.
Good morning. This initiative was support for several reasons. The first point Mr. Olivier mentioned, it is based on values. Now we are experiencing tragic days which have been titled the Revolution of Dignity, and the values are shared by Europeans and transatlantic community, and they are laying the foundation of our organization. And Ukraine is a unique phenomenon in 21st century. The best practices can be also used to reform the Russian Federation. Without Russia, Europe cannot be secure and develop in a good way. Russia is an important factor, so I agree with the previous speaker that Europe should know more about dynamics of what is happening in Ukraine, that this is not a civil war but armed aggression on the part of Russia. The Crimea is occupied and no referendum could be held according to Ukrainian constitution, and the Minsk agreements they should be followed. Our ideological part that the Europe can be secure only when the Putin's regimes go away, and the humanitarian vision of the best thinkers of 19th century, Ukraine can prosper as well as Europe when Putin's regime falls and Russia supports European trends. Now, the session of questions. Bogdana Kostyuk, Radio Freedom. The question is, the European Union lifts sanctions from Belarus. What about your club? Does it plan to work with Belarusian opposition? Is it possible to support Belarusian mass media and policy? The question was addressed to all panelists. Maidan of Foreign Affairs for over a year have been cooperating with the representatives of Belarusian opposition with support and information terms. Hartia 97, this is a positional website, and we have conducted roundtable discussions where we address the issue what Belarus should look like. No security will be in Ukraine if in Belarus the events will be no good. So taking into consideration that Belarus is our ally, and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the Ministry of Defense opinions and the request of Belarusian president to place some rocket elements on its territory from the part of Russia. A pragmatic approach of Europeans lifting up sanctions and cooperation with President Lukashenko. This is a mistake of European parliamentarians, and we do not see now good efforts in the European states States they accept the blackmail on the part of President Lukashenko. Of course, I would like to add and to answer to Vladimir, of course, the audience here, we answered this question in 2014. Crimea is Ukraine. For us, this is out of question. This is an absolute fact. As concerned Belarus, anti-imperialist direction, European values suppose engage in all stakeholders who share the European values and working in all post-Soviet territory. We promote just the opposite vector, the vector towards Europe, the vector to our real home. And in our opinion, this is the mission of those people who are Russian by their roots, but they do not share the occupational position of the Kremlin. We have one more question. Sergei Berezhnoy, Liganet. The question to all speakers about think tank establishing. As far as I know, think tanks exist and functions to perform orders which are very specific, and these orders are initiated by specific groups. And they explain how to change situation in the right direction by those requests. In Russia, as far as I see the situation, these groups exist in isolated manner, and political forces who can give them orders and set goals and tasks and describe resources for changing the situation to be used in simulation, in modeling. So these models seems not to be in demand. What to do with this contradiction? That is why this think tank is established in Kiev, because in totalitarian Russia, organizational projects aimed at changing the system of governing the country, they are impossible. That is why it starts here in Kiev, this European, Russian, Ukrainian membership of our think tanks. This is a key feature of our organization. You are right, there is a customer and there is a think tank. In our case, the customer is the history and the people who suffer from hostilities. Of course, we should make not only think tank but more. But first we should generate some intellectual product and then set some organizational tasks. Of course, there was one question about Khodorkovsky already. In Russia, these forces are divided and isolated and dispersed, because if we have some kind of organizational product, it will suffer immediately shock from Ukraine. Theory, according to theory, a think tank can be established at some political force or some governmental body. This is not right. A think tank can be an independent body. The main thing is its vector. In our case, this is European choice and those issues which which concerns interrelations and interinfluence of Ukraine and Russia. This is the distinguished feature of our think tank. I'm a physicist by educational background, and I learned what is the difference between physics and mathematics. So mathematics generate some algorithms and physics use them. So our think tank will be a theoretical foundation. What we do, it will be in demand within a short-term period. As for me, one of the lessons I learned from Euromaidan of 2014 that poorly prepared reforms, they result in large problems and troubles for the country, because there are no mechanisms of intellectual interaction, and the old elite can't be changed, not because of some conspiracy between oligarchs, but because there is no demand, there is no supply. I am now thinking beyond Russia's border. There are some people there who are loyal to their government, to their leaders. They are not enough unloyal to the government to leave the country and to fight for oppositional forces. There is a demand menu in restaurant is where you choose between several options, 1, 2, 3, and for this choice to be a good one, to be a tasty one, someone should cook this dish. So we are cooking the dish in our think tank. This is our task. We have time for one small question. The question from Russian mass media sources, no conclusion can be made, as well as from mass media sources in Ukraine. Besides you in the Russian parliament, are there any people who understand what is happening? We have a core in Russia, but it is not healthy. There are individual members of Russian parliament who are reasonable. For example, Dmitry Budkov, he is famous, he is my friend, Valery Zubov, Sergei Petrov, and some other members of parliament. They have their own reasons and considerations. But someone may behave calm. Just remember what was the situation in Ukraine, what it had been before the Revolution of Dignity, when some MPs were afraid to express loudly their considerations. And this concerned discussion about Khodorkovsky, this is one of the discussions in the Russian community, whether those who now are not loud, but they will become loud if they are supported. I think they should be supported. This is the right strategy. Unfortunately, we should close our debates at this point.